I couldn't help but notice in some of your opening remarks today, you were talking a lot about emerging markets, but not the sort of, classic China and India stuff that we're used to hearing about, although there was some of that too. But you talked about countries like Morocco or cell phone use in Africa and how they're leaders in web banking on their mobile phones. I'm wondering if you could speak a little more to this idea of opportunities in emerging markets that maybe we don't hear about in the news every day.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of the conversation is dominated by China and India, given they're both billion-plus countries. But I think there are a lot of other countries too where there's big growth opportunities for companies around the world. Indonesia is talked about a little, but 240 million people. It's been growing nicely and has had stable government. That's one of the big shifts, has been these stable governments in places. So Indonesia, and then in Africa, I think, which is the dark continent, not talked a lot about, seen as a lot of difficulty and trouble, has really come into its own in the last 10 years. And if you look at Nigeria, I mentioned in the speech that Nigeria, there are more new babies born there than all of Europe combined this last year. So if you're Procter & Gamble or Unilever or any consumer goods company, that's an important market, 150 million people. Ethiopia, which I always sort of associate with the Bob Geldof aid for Africa. This is one of the fastest growing countries on earth, and it's got new government. By new, I'd say it's in the last 5 years, but and then an economic program, an agricultural development program, continuity in terms of their economic policies, and so it's growing very well and is a place where people can make investments. And then you've got a consumer class that's using the phone, as I mentioned, in these places where people it's actually improving productivity. If you're a farmer, it's easier to buy seeds, it's easier to know what roads to use, weather, all that sort of stuff, and do banking. A lot of the payment system is being solved by phone banking, which is a big innovation there. And then I was mentioning, Turkey is a country that we have huge excitement about, growing at close to 10%, again, stable government. Poland, Eastern Europe, we don't talk a lot about. Poland is a place I would really pay attention to. It again now has stable government, continuity for the first time in government, in a business class, if you will, that's getting more established. CEOs are not being taken out every 18 months. They're actually lasting longer. So there's a number of these, and then Brazil, as we talked about before, that's probably is talked about, but I think again we underestimate the internal growth potential. So there's lots of opportunities out there beyond just the India and China. It's a fact, I think, now that's out there that you just because you're in a large company doesn't therefore mean you're going to survive for a long time because of all the changes going on. And I think what it implies is, and this is what I would tell my son now, who's in university, is that you need to be ready to adapt to many changes that are going on. Don't ignore them, learn about them. Whether it be languages or different ways of thinking about things, different cultures. And I think the ability to learn different skills and have mentors who can help you. So this adaptability is going to be a very important leadership skill. Mm-hmm. And one of the charts I didn't show up there was a lot of the job losses going on right now in the US, which I worry about, are actually people with bachelor's degrees. It's not the uneducated. It's actually people they've made the investment and been educated, but those jobs are moving to different parts of the world. And that's tough because you've made the investment, you've done what you were supposed to do, right, and then it's gone. And that's why I think someone asked a very good question there, but I didn't answer very well on the university side. What does that mean for our education system? And one of the things I think is actually quite important, we can't think about university as up until you're 28. I think university now has to be lifetime. And when you're 50, you may need to do some type of university. When you're 60, you may need to do some type of university. When you're 70, I think it's lifelong learning, not all up front and then you're ready for anything.
Future leaders, are going to need business experience, social experience, and government, this sort of idea of this triangular leadership model. I think that's just so interesting, and I'm wondering, if you are already a leader today and you're focused on the rest of your career and you want to be one of those more well-rounded leaders, what can you do in your career to prepare for that?
Well, I think one of the things, let's say you're 45 years old or 50 years old and you want to do so, I think there's a number of things. One is to be involved in your community, and I think that could be, in the UK for example, the government has actually encouraged business leaders to be on boards of government entities. So they actually have you actually are involved with the tax department to help them in what they're doing as a board member, so at least you're getting some visibility into where that is. A second dimension, which is the social sector, is what are you doing in your community to help people? You might like education, it may be innovation, but I think you should be doing something in your community, or maybe a broader issue, maybe water. As I said, that Peter Brabeck from Nestle, he's passionate about water. It's obviously related to his business, but it's not just that. He's very worried about how we use the world's resources. It's not going to make me wealthier. It's not going to make me famous. It's just something I think is important. And by doing that, he works with the IFC and the World Bank. He meets with a lot of government leaders. He meets with a lot of NGOs that are trying to work on that. And I guess, sorry, you don't have to be the CEO to do that. I think these are things you can get involved in. I think about hospitals in Toronto. Is there a role you can play to help in a hospital? It doesn't mean going on a board. Is there some area in there where you can provide on a voluntary basis, not on a voluntary basis you're trying to help?
Right.
So I just think it's getting into the community. Education, I think, is a very popular one now because people think they can, you can take it in bite-sized chunks and you can do it. For example, is go and work in government on secondment for a while. What if you worked in the Treasury or you worked in the Department of Indian Affairs, because you see,
just for a few years.
For a few years, do it for, or even 18 months or two, but just to see how decisions get made, because they're not made in the same way you do, and it's not right or wrong. It's just how they're done. It's a different dynamic of how things. And you, I think, will be a better business leader if you realize when you're meeting with someone who's in government what they have to go through, and vice versa.
Yeah, I recently met someone doing work with Engineers Without Borders who said a similar thing. You go overseas and you have a real vision of the change that you want to affect, but first you have to understand the system in which you want to affect the change. It's a similar idea, right?
I totally agree, yeah.
That's interesting. And the last question I wanted to ask you about today was the issue you addressed of your public and your private life not really being that separate anymore. Right. Don't think that's a secret to anyone that has a Facebook account. Right. But I'm just wondering, do you feel that is something that people need to understand and be okay with, or is that a sort of situation where you need to manage your image? That's
a great question. I mean, I don't think it's about managing your image, because again, people can figure it out. I think the truth, the point I would say is the truth gets out. And if you act like something that you're not, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So I think it's be who you are. There's some famous quote of some Persian philosopher who said this once about, you be who you are. Don't say you're something else, and if you make mistakes, and just be who you are, and that'll be very good. I don't think it's a matter of don't go drink. People are human beings. And I'm having a discussion with some of our younger colleagues in McKinsey about this, and I think the world's going to get used to the fact that that's the case, and so there'll actually be a little more understanding about people being humans. I think what people won't like is when you say, I'm a X, Y, and Z person and I always do these sorts of things, and then you don't. That's when I think you get the, I don't know if that makes sense, you get the disconnect. So it's more I wouldn't manage an image, it's more be who you are, because if you're talking about something that's different from who you are, you will get chopped. That's what I think happens, and I think there's not a lot of patience for that.